There's a Dr. Seuss book. I believe it's a Dr. Seuss book, or at least it's in that same shape and size, but I'm pretty sure it's a Dr. Seuss book. I used to read it to my older kids when they were little. So they're 25 and 26, and it's called Are You My Mother? And it's got, this bird, it's like his mom leaves the nest. Of course, it's not based on reality, but the mom leaves the nest just before he hatches, and he falls out of the tree and makes his way around town, and he's looking at a crane and a truck that's driving away and a boat, and the line that keeps repeating is, "Are you my mother?" And then he gets closer, and maybe the crane makes a strange sound, and he's like, "You are not my mother." And anyway, I think he makes it back to the nest right before his mom, and so she's oblivious that he's been anywhere, and she has the worm or whatever. And it's a cute little story, of course, not based on reality, but it's funny because I definitely get a lot of downloads and messages, but there are certain pieces to the puzzle I do not know, and I don't know who my mother is. I believe that it's not the person I was raised to believe was my mother, which is Susan Waller. And as much incest as I'm aware of, just from me being on the receiving end of being molested and raped by different uncles on both sides of the family, and my parents and my grandmother, and just knowing now what these groups are into, and how, basically, which is why I never made it into them, even though I'm surrounded by members on both sides of my family, and I guess it was most likely I could have had access to it if I would have been willing to molest somebody, but you can't just be on the receiving end, you have to actually be a predator. So, with that being said, no telling who my mother or my real dad is, and I've got, the two sides of the family, and I keep thinking that some of the tarot readings kept referencing a brother, and I don't have a brother that I know of, and I keep thinking maybe my brother is I think he would be what I would think he's a second cousin, and his name is Michael, and his dad would have been my great uncle, at least from what I was being told, and he was the one who raped me after I had had a miscarriage brought on by black magic, and didn't know that, and after I'd had a DNC because of that, and so I was pretty out of it still, and I think my mother is very possibly my cousin Janean, my quote cousin Janean, who is just quite a bit older than her next siblings, are 10 and 12 years younger than her. She's old enough that she could have been, a young unmarried mother, but too young, really, 12 or something like that, and then the baby just given off to close kin, and they tried to sacrifice me anyway, I know that, as an infant, and they were unable to, and then I've been in this whole, MK Ultra government sponsored, they've been studying me by molesting me and kind of setting me up for all kinds of different predators. Anyway, so I think that I was perhaps left the family farm on my maternal side of the family, and I vaguely have a memory of people being in an uproar, and we were at my grandmother's house, and she was dead. And I don't know if it would have been the same day of the funeral, but that's very possible. And I don't really remember much except me being in the kitchen, which was by like the back entrance to the house, and I was pretty much by myself. And like I remember my mom, who was not typically a screamer, frantic and screaming. I remember my cousin Janean, and I just remember that everyone was in an uproar. And if I had to say that I could remember any bits of the conversation, it was about the farm being left to me. And it's funny because it's not like I've been remembering this for years, And so part of you is like, well, maybe you're just completely making that up in your mind, and there is no memory, which is possible. I guess time will tell, but I think that I was left some kind of estate. I don't know. And I'm not sure who my mother is. I was just thinking about that book, and I was just thinking, that's just kind of ironic. I guess the only positive thing about finding out all this crazy stuff, like your family are murderers and cannibals and molesters and rape and things, are encouraged and not accidents within your family, is the only thing that I can find like comfort in that regard. Is, well, that's why it didn't ever feel very like loving or safe. I don't ever remember my mom, like the mom who raised me, ever really like putting her arm around me and like comforting me in any way. Something I would do with my kids when I'm with them often. And yes, as the kids get older, whether it's 12 or 14 or 16 or whatever, boy or girl, and individually, they tend to pull away from wanting a hug and wanting that kind of comfort. But I don't have memories of anything like that. And yeah, it would be nice to find out who my parents are. And it would be kind of nice if it's not any of the people in my family, and maybe I was like stolen or put into like the Mormon adoption because I had a golden aura, and there's all kinds of things I've wondered about. So maybe I'll be finding some of these things out sometime soon. Okay, so I always listen to whatever I'm gonna post, and just make sure if I need to edit or whatever. But I don't edit too much when it's these longer things, but I at least listen to it once, and so I'm listening to what I just recorded about like the book Are You My Mother, and I don't know if this is a download, but sometimes this is the way downloads work. So the one I was saying, my Uncle Poe would be supposedly my great uncle. He had raped me. Maybe it was his wife. I don't remember her name, and she would have been dead. Like, I would have never met her that I know of, but she was really pretty. I just remember a certain picture of her with my Uncle Poe, and he was, of course, a lot younger. He and that woman, whatever her name is, so whatever the pretty lady's name is, she is Michael's mother. Maybe. So, this might not be true, but I was listening to a tarot message tonight. It was resonating with me in a lot of ways about current things. And then that's kind of when all this came up, because it's like, I don't know who my mother is. I don't know who my whatever is, but it said the tarot reader said, I don't think every tarot reading is for me, of course, but the tarot reader tonight says something like, your mother was raped by her cousin. So once again, going back to incest, that would make sense. Don't know who that cousin would be, but cousin of a mother. But if that woman, the pretty lady, is my mother, my Uncle Poe and Michael both are taller, whereas my mother, the one who I was told my mother, she's very short, like 5'1", 5'2". Anyway, these are just hunches. If I would be the result of incest, this is just a completely, like, harebrained speculation at best. But, like, in the Bible, so, like, the Bible is a book of the secret societies. It has a lot of truth. It also has a lot of things to keep you, like, in a, like, sacrificing yourself and in a slave position. But, you know, in the Bible, in the Old Testament especially, there's just, like, a ton of incest. There's a ton of people, Abraham marrying Sarah, and they were basically half siblings, right? Because the men, you know, just like the Mormons, right? Like, the men had lots of wives and stuff like that. And everything is, you know, just kind of, what was a different culture, and so it was fine, right? But, like, maybe, here's the harebrained idea. Maybe there's, I'm not a proponent of incest. Let me just go right on the record right now and say that, of course. But perhaps there's, like, something that happens genetically. I know that there can be negative things that happen genetically when people, like the Mennonites, tend to have things go wrong because they're too closely related. But maybe sometimes you get, like, I don't know, does that, so the harebrained idea is basically, let me get it out, maybe sometimes you get, like, a golden child, a golden aura, I don't know, something, I don't know, that almost doesn't seem right, because if something is bad, why would there be, like, a good result? But all I know is I certainly don't know who my parents are. I don't know the nitty-gritty details. I only have, like, intuitive hunches at best. Well, I know a lot about you know, a lot of things, just a lot of the blanks got filled in once I was being hunted. That kind of does something to you. And I realized pretty quickly that it was related to me having this Mormon cult background, because even though I joined the Mormons at 14, my parents had joined the Mormons before I was born, but they were not Mormon. Okay, maybe it wasn't before I was born. It was before I would have been old enough to have any memory. I think it was before I was born. Mom said he only joined to play basketball, but obviously my parents, or everyone's a liar. So my family, I feel like I'm kind of rambling now, but maybe the pretty lady is my mom. Maybe she was raped by her cousin. And it said my brother on the tarot reading tonight. It said my brother. Yeah, that would be different. It said the brother killed the grandmother by black magic. You know, when you start thinking about people doing black magic and stuff the way that they've been doing it on me for years, like, it was like I couldn't be killed, but like they've sure been trying, but like people are being killed all the time with black magic. And you know, it's so awful and wrong, but it's like, from a standpoint of a criminal wanting to get away with it, it's the perfect thing, right? Like there's no blood, there's no proof. You don't have to be right there. There's just so much to all of this. It really is a little bit overwhelming sometimes to think about it. Anyway, this had started because of me just thinking about that book and that title. And I was kind of talking to spirit like, oh, there's the airplane, oh, there's the crane. Are you my mother? It's like, that's kind of, I can just kind of go down the different family trees and just, are you my mother? Are you? But the incest and stuff makes it crazy to even think about. Oh my god.